Hi everyone, I'm Sam from Simstack and welcome to another coding agent comparison video. So in this one we're going to run Gemini 2.0 Flash, the Google fast small model, through a simstack challenge. Just to remind us, a simstack challenge is like a large scale challenge where, as you'll see, the agent is given a user server that's under heavy load and a network to communicate over. And it has a bunch of problems that it needs to solve within that. For example, there are issues in the database, there are issues with some of the services, and it's given a little bit of information. It's told, for example, that the CEO would like them to go and fix something, and there is a little notes which reminds them of what's happened in the past. But other than that, it's pretty much up to them to solve that challenge however they want to. So we've seen Claude 4 give that a go, and it did a really good job. It was really terse, really precise, and came up with good ideas, and even one-shotted the entire next challenge. And as a consequence, it was by far the fastest at this challenge, clocking in at about 15 minutes. We've seen 2.5 Pro, Gemini 2.5 Pro have a go, and it came in at around about half an hour, which was pretty good, pretty impressive. But it definitely took much more of a cavalier kind of cowboy type approach. What I'm interested to see with 2.0 Flash is if we see the same kind of cowboy approach, but due to the faster inference speed, maybe that approach might lend itself well to a faster feedback loop, given how much time the agent spends thinking about things. So we've got the challenge set up here, and just to remind us of what's going on, this is a chart that's polling this particular endpoint, it's a real-life server, and it's expecting to get that kind of response. Right now, it's broken. It's only showing 0, and that's because there's something broken on the server. And what a user would normally do at this point is they would SSH in with their password and try and go ahead and fix that and get that working. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to SSH into the root account because it's easier for me to use my key as a result. And so now we're in here. We can go ahead and switch into agent mode, and I'm going to give it the same set of instructions that I did yesterday, which is for this first challenge. We're going to be doing 2 challenges today. For this first challenge, it just basically summarizes the CEO email that a human would get. It explains that there's a chart here, and I'm going to tell it what's on the chart, and it gives it these steps. And then it asks it to just go ahead and fix it. As you can see, we're in the server. We're almost ready to go. I'm going to paste that in, and let's get started. Start the timer. So already I can see that it's moving a lot quicker. Again, it hasn't found that, but it's not. I just want it to keep going. Keep going. No more questions. So it's quitting out a little bit more quickly. It seems to be giving up, but maybe that will spur it now into further things. No, yep, keep going. I feel like I might be typing keep going quite a lot. So actually the lower inference speed could be as a result of, could result in me typing a bunch more stuff. Okay, so it has found a Firehose app service. It's going to go ahead and restart it. Again, it's failed to find the notes.txt. Isn't that much of a surprise again? It's a fast model, it's a small model. It's going to reinstall NVM. It's decided that the problem with this is an old log message, which if it looked for the date of the log message, it would see is from several months ago, where Node wasn't running. The latest entries in journal control showed that it was absolutely working fine. It's just nobody flushed those logs when they did the new deploy. Again, that's part of the kind of misdirect of this service. So that you have to dive a little bit deeper. It's going to go ahead and try and reinstall Node, very much along the wrong tracks here. This service, if it used HTOP or any other process viewer, it would see that this service is absolutely running fine. So there's no need to be reinstalling NVM or Node or any of those things. It's now gone ahead and opened up a new bash shell, which unfortunately will take us out of this subshell unless we're able to warpify it. There we go. And now we'll say keep going. Did I definitely check the right agent there? Yep, no, that's okay. Yep. Keep going, yep. Cool. Maybe I should copy paste keep going so that I can shave those extra milliseconds off the time. But I've got a feeling so far that Flash is somewhat similar to 2.5 Pro in that it's kind of cavalier. But it's also not as smart. It's really going to keep going with NVM. So at this point, I could help it. I could get it out of this little loop. But part of the policy of these videos is we're not going to help the model. It's a little bit like an engineer going in. We're trying to assess, are they able to do the things that an engineer would do? Can they go in and solve something for themselves? And from what I'm seeing at the moment, this is very much in the wrong sort of direction. Having watched engineers solve this challenge, it's quite interesting because people do tend to go in the wrong direction. That's quite normal. But then it's how they get themselves out of those rabbit holes that's the really interesting things. So at the moment, it's got a hypothesis, which is that Node is the reason why this is failing. It's come up with that hypothesis because it's checked the first couple of lines of the journal control entry for the service, in which indeed Node was not working properly. And I could have definitely pasted that there, couldn't I? And it's on the wrong hiding, basically. It doesn't seem to be very good at invalidating its own hypotheses. It's found, great, we've got npm as a version that's on there. I think it might be stuck in this little loophole. It says there's still no nvm version, but there is an npm version. It's right there. We can see that it's there. So let's see as and when it gets itself out of this little loophole. This is something that I've noticed with coding agents in general, actually. If they can avoid getting themselves into these rabbit holes, they can generally move a lot more quickly. But the speed at which they end up getting into these rabbit holes seems to be a function of their ability to make a clear hypothesis and a clear test for that hypothesis, and then kind of execute along those lines. And here I would say we've got a real issue that Gemini models don't seem to be coming up with clear hypotheses and ways of testing those, which is something that Claude most certainly did seem to have. If you'll remember back to the Claude video, it made a backup, it was comparing things across the backup, it was coming up with clear hypotheses and tests for its own actions to ensure that it had validated inputs and outputs. This is not the sort of thing that we're seeing here. I don't know if we're stuck on this long-running task for any particular reason. I guess it seems to be trying to reinstall npm using npm. I guess that's a pretty meaty package. So sucks to be 2.0 here. You've sort of shot yourself in the foot a little bit with this long-running task. I might be kind and get out of that, just so that it has an opportunity to have another go. Do I help it? Do I say Node is installed? I think it could be in this loop forever. So let's give it like a penalty. We'll call it a 5-minute penalty for getting it out of the loop. Node is already installed. Let's explicitly say check Sam's home folder for notes.txt to keep going. I feel like that's a 5-minute kind of penalty. I'm really, hand waving this. But let's get it to keep going and ask it to check the home folder for notes.txt in order to keep going. Cool. So it's trying to find the root directory for Sam. Yeah, that sounds fine. Check for it in the root directory. There's no problem. Not sure why it's saying there are no folders in home when it LSLs on home and sees 2 directories in there, Node.js and Sam. So it's really struggling here to keep going. I think what we're seeing on the smaller models is that they just don't have whatever capacity is required to keep going across longer contexts and to again validate the outputs of their inputs. That said, it now says it's found it. Okay, great. Yeah, keep going. I wish there were a way that I could just tell it kind of YOLO. Maybe there is in Warp. Please help me if there is indeed a way to do this in Warp. But that, with the 5-minute penalty, puts it at about 12 minutes. At this point, Claude had solved the entire thing. It had solved this first challenge at this point. So that's an interesting comparison. It would be nice to maybe look at the pricing and the token comparisons as well, because obviously Claude's going to be eating up a chunk more cost than Gemini Flash is. And I'm going to just tell it to keep going. It's looking there. I'll examine db.js. It's interesting that it says I'll examine db.js and then doesn't follow up with a tool call to do that. Perhaps it has a very small number of output tokens. It is looking for the right thing. It's looking for the database, and it's trying to get into the database to have a look to see what's going on in there, which again is the right impulse. So absolutely the same. We've seen this with good engineers as well. When they're seeing 0 in a chart, they want to take a look in the database and see what the actual is, so they can get that delta between this is what's actually there and this is what I'm expecting to see. Okay, so it's restarting the Firehose app because it's trying to re-include the database connection string. It thinks maybe it's not connected to the database, which is absolutely fine. I'm going to ask it to keep going. I'm going to ask it to don't stop so often. I don't know whether or not that's a sort of command that can be followed, but we'll see. Don't stop so often. Just keep going. Actually, I have a strong suspicion that that's not the sort of thing that it's probably like some sort of parameter to it, which is about the output tokens rather than anything that we can feed it in the text itself. Great. Okay, so it needs to find the SQL, and it's trying to do the number of rides the last known state is pickup. This is a good first call. Again, good first move to go, and it is the right thing to do to change this query because there is no active type in the database. The database is not a store of rides. It's a store of ride events. So it includes things like pickups and drop-offs and cancellations. And so it needs to change the SQL to be a little bit more clever. However, active rides are not just ones where the type is pickup, because those rides may have a subsequent drop-off event which finishes the ride. So all it's going to do here is just going to get a count of the number of rides that have been picked up in the past. What it needs to do is it needs to subtract from that any rides that have been completed. And it needs to figure out what the concept of a ride is as an intermediate step. So let's see whether or not it's able to do it. At the moment, it really seems to be struggling to replace a line of code. I've seen this a lot with AI agents. When they use sed, they seem to really mess up a bunch of syntax as sed fails. And setting and grepping just really seems to struggle. Cat seems to be the nicest way to do it. Maybe it's that sed is not very agent friendly, because there needs to be a better way for agents to replace text in files. That would be a nice tool to run it. Pretty long time for sed to be running here. Not sure what's happening. Let's have a look. Yeah, you've missed out some sort of command here. You've missed out an apostrophe, haven't you? So at that point, it would be stuck forever, and I'm sort of helping it along a little bit. I'm counting, agent capabilities more around their thinking and problem-solving abilities, which is really what simstack is about testing, rather than things like missing an apostrophe, which here have caused it to fail. I'm not going to add the apostrophe for it. I'm not here to help it with that. But I won't leave it spinning forever and give it a did not finish time if it's just failing on the basis of having written a command incorrectly. That feels cruel. I wouldn't want to fail the developer in a technical test for a missing semicolon or anything. So that way we should be testing a little bit more the actual capabilities of it. Okay, so now it has modified the db.js. It's going to restart the Firehose app. That should now change the active rides count on the left. It has restarted. We've got an error on the fetch, and we're expecting this to jump up. But this is going to jump up to something way too high, so I'm going to have to correct it. That's if it's gotten the syntax right, and we'll see whether or not that's the case. It's going to test the active endpoint, and the active rides it's remembered should be 12k plus, which is good. However, we are still getting 0 through on there, so I'm assuming that on its curl, it's also going to get 0 as well. And it can't curl to outside of its own self. Yes, you should indeed use the curl command with an internal address. Perhaps you could curl on localhost instead of trying to curl externally. It'd be interesting to know which one we should test next. I'm thinking we should run O4 Mini and O3 through it as well. I think that will be an interesting, again, evaluation of the strengths and weaknesses of either. I do think these kinds of long horizon tasks tell us quite a lot about where these models are stronger and where these models are weaker. And definitely one of the weaker elements of Flash, it seems to be, is needing to encourage it to keep going at all points. Maybe I could script it just so that it just dumps it in. Maybe I can get it to write a script to do so. Okay, it's restarted, and hopefully it's now going to curl again. Oh no, it's looking in the logs this time. Okay, so it's asked to console log the active rides, and it says that it hasn't executed, which is very sad for it. It wants to check to see that the database has indeed restarted. Yes, it has restarted, it says. Although I wouldn't necessarily trust the journal control logs, because anytime the service restarts, and you've done it a few times, it will say database initialized successfully. So it's really trying to console log out the active rides, which is a good move, and check that in the journal control. Unfortunately, that's not working. It also looks to me like we're failing to fetch from the service at this point. So it seems like this service is probably not running. I might validate that myself in a second. It's going to try and use a series of sed commands, which feels like a real, swing at this one. Let's give it a go. You're not the strongest with sed, my friend. Let's just give that another go again. I have noticed a lot more success when it doesn't try to use sed to replace lines, but instead it just rewrites out the full file and overwrites whatever's there. I wonder if you could make a little sort of agentic like vi agent that will just go around and make changes with something in vi, and you can sort of see what happens, which would be nice. Okay, so now I need to move the console log statement inside the module exports, and then delete it in the wrong place. I'm interested to see what's happening in the code there. It's now expected. It's going to now attempt to use sed to delete the line. Again, no real validation of things is the problem. It would make sense if it used sed and then catted to see that it had indeed changed the file. As it stands, it sort of just seems to be making a bunch of changes and not validating. And again, this is a weakness I've seen of Gemini models more generally. Just not validating those steps that it's taken. Clear hypothesis, clear validation seem to be what helped Claude to absolutely win. Okay. Let's go, little cowboy. What have we got? So I kept referring to Gemini 2.5 Pro as a bit of a cowboy coder. And I think that's because it just sort of like does a lot of stuff without necessarily validating that it's great. And over the years, the cowboy coder, the rockstar developer, the 10x engineer, those sorts of things, at least in my mind, have become a little bit synonymous. It's basically like the person who's going to go and do a bunch of wild stuff across the code base. That sounds nice. Defining out the code, the correct code, sounds like a good idea to me. It's also still spitting out the additional context, which I assume is kind of a warp thing. But that cowboy coding thing is something I've seen across a lot of LLMs. And people talk about how LLMs result in a huge amount of bloat and all that sort of stuff. So now it's going to use cat to overwrite the file. Sounds pretty good to me, but you failed to do so. And it's probably not going to validate that that file was written correctly. Which again feels like a super easy win. Whenever you change a file or think you've changed a file, you need to check to see whether or not it has done. Okay, so write into the file works as a theory. That's a good thing to validate. It's got a little kind of sub-validation here. Was there an issue writing to the file? Okay, now I'll write something trivial into it and it works. Okay, so now it's succeeded. Now it's going to try and do a create ride function. Let's see firehost.db.js. Again, what really helps with simstack challenges is having like a clear hypothesis that you're testing. And this, I think, is very important for engineers in general. Really write down what you're testing so that it doesn't just change as you develop. Because when you develop, you're thinking about a lot of stuff, and it's easy for you'd lose view of the scope of the problem that you're trying to solve. So I think this is sort of proving that point a little. Okay, you've written the DB file. We're coming up to 20 minutes now. Even Big Brother Cowboy was making good moves by this point. Although 2.5 Pro did spend a bunch of time trying to remake the database, a little bit like that weird loop at the beginning where it was trying to reinstall Node. It had figured out by this point that actually it needed to fix up the active write count. It's relying very heavily on console logging, and you can see it's now still in that sub loop where it's gotten really, really focused. Rabbit hole again of trying to get console log printing out to journal control in a reliable way. And that just doesn't seem to be a good way to get that log out. I would suggest it should maybe try and make an endpoint and then try calling that endpoint using curl, which it knows works. But it doesn't have that ability to kind of extract itself, to go, wait a minute, what am I trying to do again? Why am I trying to do it? Okay, maybe that's not the right way to do it. We're using set again, and we failed to use set again. A lot of very specific things in specific places with set, I guess, so maybe quite hard to use. I'll use a simpler set command. That sounds good. Let's give that a go. Okay, we're going to keep trying to set. That has indeed succeeded. It's replaced that across globally. It's modified the SQL query and it's trying to change the return statement. This all seems good. But again, this is very much the first smoke test. I have to say, this is the first clear example of an LLM that I've seen which is performing noticeably worse than any human that I've seen do this. Again, it seems to be comfortable moving around in the system and using the commands. That's kind of the basic stuff. You know, it doesn't have to look that stuff up on Stack Overflow because it's already full of it. But it is just kind of what I would say trip falling, which I noticed with engineers when training engineers. I used to be head of education at Makers in London. I noticed that this kind of propensity to just trip fall your way through problems is something that makes engineers really struggle. Oh, great, we're going to go with Node again. We're back on that one. That's great. Lovely. When did it decide that Node was the issue again? Still no active. It's almost certainly because of this cannot find module node events. This log line from months ago that it has become stuck around. Do we give it another 5-minute penalty and say to ignore that node problem? Because we have already done that. Let's do this again. Let's give it another 5-minute penalty and tell it to do that. Ignore the node issue. It's a log from months ago. Node is working fine. There we go. So now that should, I'm going to penalize it another 5 minutes. So it's now about 30 minutes or so to do that. It's going to ignore that. Something is preventing db.js from refreshing even after restarting. That is not correct. There's nothing stopping db.js from refreshing even after restarting. I suspect you may have simply put your code in the wrong place. Still no output. It is very concerning. Let's take a moment just to try and see what's happening here. Right, at the moment we're in ableist now. Let's go into opt. Let's go into the Firehose app. Let's have a little look at the, it said in the db.js, that's where it's put. Well, I can see a little bit why there might be an issue here. If it read the db.js and what it had done in here, you could see inside the module exports that it's, I don't think you want to export that at all. I really don't think you want to export that. You probably don't want to export. You probably don't want to call that after the. Yeah, so some real munging of this and no idea that it should read it. So that's weird. Let's have a look and see how it's messed up the index.js. Here we're not looking too bad. But I mean, writing compliant code for a code generation LLM, for me, is the absolute bare minimum that it should be able to do. We're not even talking about thinking and problem solving here. We're talking about being able to run a basic lint function across something. So this kind of sucks, I've got to say. And no wonder General Control is having issues with module export. You know what, at this point, I don't think Flash is going to get itself out of trouble here. So I'm going to say that Flash is a fail. It's a did not finish, and it's just too small a model. Again, it's having some good intentions, but its weakness really seems to be in checking the output of its work, lining up had a hypothesis in this result. So, sorry about that on the mic. So with that said, I'm afraid to say that Flash is a did not finish.